Good morning. Ready to get started? My name is Alan Merrihew. I work in the Cadam Group back at corporate in the Executive Briefing Center, and I focus on electronic commerce solutions, speaking with executives every day. And we're very fortunate to have with us today Kevin McCall, lead product manager from the BizTalk server team, to take us through the BizTalk competitive issues. And you'll notice today, or maybe you'll come out of this session going, gosh, that competitive information isn't very deep yet. And so we're asking you for your help because you are our competitive resource. Give us information. If you see information up here that's not as deep as you'd like and you have more information or you have experience with a particular product that we're talking about, we would love to hear it from you. Come up, give us your business card, send us an email. We need your help. So we know this is just our first cut. We're early stages, and we want to make this much better for you. Kevin, would you like to tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into this?
Okay. Can everybody hear this okay? Can everybody hear my shirt okay? You like this shirt? Pretty good, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so basically I spent about 8 years selling enterprise-wide distribution systems based on Unix to large corporations. And the software possessed certain integration capabilities. It supported EDI formats. And so basically I spent time not only educating customers but helping implement those solutions for customers. Came to Microsoft about 3 years ago, spent some time in Cadam with Alan, and doing e-commerce, being e-commerce competitive, and then went over to the BizTalk server efforts almost a year ago. And so now focusing on a more general integration space than I did in my prior life.
So Kevin, if you could give everybody in the room some key takeaways coming out of this session today, what would you want to tell them?
Okay. First of all, this opportunity is huge. It's huge for us in many different ways. The space is very new, it's very immature, and people are spending a ton of money on it, right? So that's important in and of itself. But it's also very, very important to Microsoft because it allows us to approach customers and tell a really great story. It allows us to say, hey, we can give you an environment that allows you to fundamentally more easily integrate your Windows applications with all of your non-Windows assets across the enterprise. So this is a great story. It allows us to approach customers in a very healthy way, and it allows us to demonstrate our thought leadership and our technical leadership in some great new technologies, of course, based on XML. Now, in this space, we're going to compete against a number of different types of organizations. Now, for internal integration, IBM really has the mind share right now. People think of IBM, MQ Integrator, they think of that stack when they're doing internal integration. They think of web methods normally when they want to do B2B integration. So they've got the early mind share there. Another thing is that, as I mentioned, BizTalk Server really is, to our customers, the kind of the culmination of our XML efforts. And so when they think about BizTalk, they think about, oh, that XML server from Microsoft. Right? And so this is going to be a very, very visible piece of our .NET strategy.
Well, and Kevin, too, on the thought leadership, I know we've had analysts actually say Microsoft are the thought leaders in this area. It's not just us saying it.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point. About a year ago, there was a lot of confusion. Our competitors were really spreading a lot of FUD around, Microsoft's really hijacking XML. Microsoft wants to take a toll on every XML document that goes over the web. And over the last 6 or 9 months, we've been doing a lot of aggressive education to the press and analysts on this issue. And it's really not coming up hardly at all anymore in the United States. As a matter of fact, we've got a number of articles that have come out in the last month that are very, very positive. They're praising Microsoft on our support for standards, our leadership in the standards efforts, and frankly, our adoption across the board of standards that is more pure than any of our competitors. Now, my favorite article was one that appeared in CRN about a day or two ago. And Oracle is currently on tour right now, telling all of the press and analysts about how Microsoft's approach to XML is all proprietary and we're trying to hijack the standard. And they've actually gotten to the point where they understand that Oracle is just talking trash, and now they're calling us and saying, hey, here's what Oracle's saying about you. Do you want to offer some quotes? And so the CRN article said, here's what Oracle said, and they didn't offer any proof. Microsoft's response, looks like Microsoft's doing a pretty good job. So that's really the flavor of the press these days.
Well, and the next key takeaway is important because we're going to be defining a bunch of different business spaces that we see out there, but BizTalk is really trying to do something bigger than that. Isn't that right?
Yeah, very good point. In this space, historically, we've run into, well, historically, in order to do integration, EDI servers and EDI technology has been used very widely. Now also, EAI products are a separate space that are really effective at doing internal integration. B2B servers have appeared more recently in order to do cross-organizational integration. So there are different types of products in this space, and we actually address all of those requirements. So we have a fairly wide, a very comprehensive approach to integration.
And that's an exciting message.
It's actually a very important one. It is exciting. It's a healthy message. Customers are embracing it, and it is part of the competitive advantage that we offer with BizTalk. If I could name one feature that is our strongest competitive feature, it is indeed BizTalk orchestration. And so for those of you that attended the keynote this morning, Flessner mentioned orchestration as an important part of our effort moving forward. And if we look at all of the products that help customers integrate their business processes more effectively, BizTalk orchestration is one of the features of the product that really stands out head and shoulders above our competitors today. So this is something we're going to want to lead with, and it's something that's going to be a competitive advantage over time.
Also, I noticed I attended the BizTalk live sessions where people are actually using BizTalk today, and they said that the orchestration piece is really, it's just head and shoulders above what's out there and makes that job so much easier. So it really is a key feature for you.
Yeah, excellent point. There was a session, you may want to listen to it because it's not going to be offered again. There was a session yesterday at 5 o'clock on live BizTalk projects and BizTalk competitive engagements where we had 5 MCS consultants come up and talk about the projects they've done with BizTalk. And their feedback was that customers very regularly are saying BizTalk orchestration is what made us really impressed with the BizTalk effort.
All right, let's take a look at the agenda. We're going to back up a little bit and talk about the market background and how we see that evolving. Kevin will take us through that. We'll give you the formal BizTalk positioning and then also how to position BizTalk against the different technologies that we'll talk about. Then we'll talk specifically about the competition, IBM, webMethods, TIBCO, Sun, and Oracle. We'll give you some competitive resources to go to and also to feed information to so that we can then put it out for the field. And then if we have time at the end, we'll have discussion and questions. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Why don't you tell us about the markets, Kevin?
Okay. And we're going to move pretty quickly through some of this. I'm going to try to, Alan's going to slow me down when I start talking too fast. That's an important thing today. But we're going to try to move through some of this pretty quickly. If you have questions, please stop us, whether answer them in line or address them at the end. Now, how many people here are familiar with EDI systems? Fairly familiar with EDI? Okay, pretty good percentage. EDI has been used for a very long time. We're going to talk about EDI. But that's just one of several different types of products customers have used to integrate systems together. The EAI space, Enterprise Application Integration space, also oftentimes referred to as A-to-A integration, integration within the firewall, represents a different type of products for doing integration. B2B servers are newer on the market. A lot of them are referred to as XML infrastructure products. Those are newer. Those are normally used to do integration across organizational boundaries. And then also there are different workflow products in this space as well. BizTalk is not a workflow product. We'll talk about why in a little while. But when you take a look at a lot of the capabilities of BizTalk, it does look workflow-like. And we'll talk about why this space is indeed different than a traditional workflow space.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, Kevin, when you were creating the slide, you were very particular about how you wanted these orbs placed. And I know it's not just because you're an anal person, but there really is significance here.
Of course not. That wouldn't be it. Yeah, a couple of things to mention here. This is a backward-looking slide, really, and the sizes of the spheres are important because EDI has been a big business historically. The B2B server market is much newer and hence is a much smaller market overall in dollar value, and there has been a lot of overlap. I mean, EDI really was B2B before B2B was B2B. People have been doing electronic interchange of documents for decades. Okay, B2B is not. Okay, the difference between B2B and what EDI was is that we're using more standard internet technologies to do it. And so there's definitely a lot of overlap there between EDI and the whole B2B idea. And likewise, there have been a few products that have been effectively used not only to do EDI, but also to do internal EAI type of integration. So the overlap is purposeful here. But another thing to mention is historically, workflow products have not been effectively integrated with the integration infrastructure. Once again, looking backward, that's starting to happen now.
All right, well, why don't you tell us, what does the EDI market look like? What's the technology? How old is it?
Okay. As I mentioned, it's been used for decades. EDI technology, it's kind of funny because it takes a while to really thoroughly discuss what EDI is, because it's a, maybe the easiest way to describe it is it's kind of a way of life, you might say. It's a whole integrated stack of technologies that facilitate the electronic exchange of documents between organizations. They can be invoices, they can be purchase orders. They usually occur in batch. So they're usually sent in batch once per night, maybe every few nights or once per week. And they're based on very, very specifically defined, very, very rigorous standards. So the stack is very tightly integrated, all the way from the wire format, all the way up to the document formats. Because it's very, very rigorous, because it's expensive to embrace this technology, it's really effective for very, very large organizations. Now, in the United States, there are two primary EDI standards that we run into most frequently. The ANSI X12 US standard and the UN EDIFACT worldwide standard that came out of CFAC. Now, there are also other standards that you see around the world, Tradecoms and CII. But what has happened is that these core standards, the primary standard libraries, really have been fragmented over time because industry-specific groups like HL7 in healthcare, or VIX in distribution, or API in oil and gas, there are hundreds of these, have said we need to define standard business document formats that are specific for our industry, that serve our constituents. So we're going to take some core EDI libraries and then describe subsets of those documents for our constituents. So what happens is that it became a very, very fragmented market.
So who are the players in the market, Kevin?
Okay. There are three primary players. There are others. There absolutely are others. But the ones you're going to run into most frequently are Sterling with the Gintran product, Harbinger, and GXS. GXS used to be GEIS, GE Information Services. They have a product called Trade Exchange. Microsoft is heavily automated on EDI, by the way. We've been using EDI for years. And we use Sterling Gintran. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit in a moment about how, for our new integration projects, we're using BizTalk. But these are good products. They're solid products. They're high performance. And once again, they've existed for a long time.
But I noticed you've got acquired, formerly. It sounds like there's...
Right.
What's going on there? I mean, the industry is shrinking, right? Or consolidating?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question because it depends on how you measure the dollars in this industry. So it is true that this is a rather tumultuous space. All of these EDI organizations are rushing to do a better job of supporting internet technologies. No one goes out there and sells EDI servers anymore. No one's approaching our customers and saying, hey, I've got a great EDI server for you, because it's not cool anymore. It's not exciting. Okay, so what they are doing is they're scrambling to incorporate standard internet technologies in their products. Support for internet standard transports, like HTTP and FTP, etc. But also the standard security mechanisms, of course, support for XML as a document format for sending those documents back and forth. So that's really the largest thing that's going on there. Another thing that's happening is that they, like many other organizations, are saying, if we have to do all of our integration at the point-to-point level by getting a bunch of techies together and establishing these point-to-point connections between organizations, then that's not really effective from a business standpoint. It doesn't serve the business well. So they're developing or integrating higher-level business process modeling capabilities into their software as well. Another thing they're doing is that they're spending time offering value-added services in the form of van services or trading marketplaces. So that's something we see a lot as well.
Now this last bullet, the value-added services, when I've been talking to some of the EDI vendors, I get the sense that they're not just creating these services for fun. They are actually and trying to reinvent themselves in this space. Is that true?
Well, it's absolutely true. And another thing, coming back on a question you asked a moment ago, it's important to understand that the EDI product market is now starting to shrink. It was about flat last year, and so EDI products are really starting to shrink now. The EDI services market, however, is still growing. And this really reflects an interest across our customer base to pay for the services for those guaranteed delivery of documents. Okay, so the internet, as an unreliable medium, still makes it difficult to have highly reliable, documentable, verifiable audit trails for the documents that move between our customers and their trading partners. And so most of our customers are still willing to pay for those value-added services. So they know exactly when the batch of documents went into their mailbox, when their trading partner picked up that batch, and then completed the transmission of that batch. That's still very valuable information for them.
Well, so let's look at what the analysts say about the market. We've got a nice graph here that defines what's going on and has some projections to look at.
Okay. Well, this one we're going to move pretty quickly over, of course, because it pretty much speaks for itself. The bottom line is people are doing more and more trading of business documents using standard internet technologies, and over time they see the classic, the pure EDI market starting to decline.
So the yellow line there is the EDI, and the green line going up is the internet-based transaction.
Right. And it is a little bit blurry because EDI documents historically have normally been sent back and forth over value-added networks offered by GEIS or AT&T or IBM, right? But you can also send, let's say, XML documents over the internet. But you can mix those. For example, I could send a classic EDI document over the internet, over HTTP. Okay? Or I could send an XML document over a value-added network. So these lines are blurry. Okay? So you will see customers that say, hey, I'm using a lot of EDI technology today. I already support certain EDI document formats. Maybe I can lower my costs by sending them over the internet over HTTP. So you'll see some blurring there.
Okay, so we have a market in transition. Let's take a look at EAI and see what's going on there.
Okay. EAI is classic integration within the firewall. We also refer to this as A-to-A integration. These products have been used almost 10 years now, and these products have been fairly widely used over 5. Now, this is all about integrating applications internally. Now, since this technology is integration infrastructure, it's much like application server plumbing, where it grows roots. Once companies install this infrastructure and they use it to connect applications together, it's there for a while. I mean, they're really setting up stakes.
So there's a lot of consulting going on, a lot of custom programming, all sorts of expensive services, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Normally what you're doing is you're accessing an API that's exposed by that package in order to use the integration server by that package. And so what we see, for example, is you see a heavy use of application-specific adapters, so that, for example, if I want to take a document out of my line of business application and then I want to send it to Lawson or something, then I might call an adapter that handles not only the conversion of that document format for me, but then the delivery of that document to Lawson. Or, for example, an SAP connector that takes the document and delivers it to my SAP instance no matter what platform SAP is running on. So you see these adapters used very frequently in the EAI world.
So also you have highly proprietary. I think that's key here, is that it tends to be a highly proprietary system, not using open transformation methods and things like that, right?
Yeah, that's right. As a matter of fact, the EAI products themselves have normally been represented by a fairly tightly integrated stack. They, for example, normally require the use of a specific message queuing technology, like MQ Series, or they provide their own. So Vitria or Level 8 or Tibco, they provide their own message queuing stack of technologies. It's not MQ Series or MSMQ, something that's widely used. It's their own proprietary stack. So that's built into the product oftentimes and integrated with the other layers as well.
Okay, well let's look at who the players are in the market, and we've put this in order of importance in the marketplace.
Yeah, it's really hard because if you look across this list, obviously there are a number of companies listed here. It is a very fragmented market. This is listed in order of market share for dollars, so market share by dollars. Now, a few of you might look at this list as well. How many people have run into like Mercator out there? Only a few. Okay, Mercator is a tool that's also highly used in the EDI space. Mercator is really the best mapping tool in the world. It's the Cadillac of mapping tools. The downside is that you pretty much have to have a PhD in Mercator in order to use it, right? It's a real pain in the ass. So anyway, there are lots of different products in this space. There are subtle differences between them, but these are the types of organizations you're going to run into. The most common one, of course, is the IBM MQ stack.
Okay, so what's happening in the EAI space in terms of direction in the market?
Okay, what the EAI players are doing collectively is that they, like the EDI players, are also rushing to support internet technologies. So basically they're saying, hey, we've got this plumbing that's been used historically to connect applications together internally. Usually very proprietary technology used across that stack of plumbing. And they're saying, hey, we also want to be able to allow our customers to do integration across organizational boundaries. And so they're also scrambling to support standard transports, open document formats based on XML, more open exchange frameworks, etc. So that's very common with EDI vendors.
So it looks similar to what's happening in the EDI space then. There's sort of a convergence here in both these market segments. Is that right?
Absolutely. Both of them are rushing because, B2B is big, right? I mean, B2B has been the rage, And so they're both trying to do the right things to support what's required in that space. They, like the EDI vendors, are also saying, hey, we've got to bump things up a level. You know, we've got to provide a comprehensive business process modeling type of environment in order to make it easier for customers to do integration projects. Right? So they're also doing that as well.
All right, so let's take a look at that B2B server market and see what's going on there.
Okay, so what are the characteristics of these newer B2B products? Now, these are the newer players in the market, and they have a lot of mind share. These are the ones that really went out there and started waving the XML flag, even before organizations like Microsoft and IBM were really out there touting XML aggressively. So these organizations were out there 3-4 years ago saying, hey, XML is the way to do trading over the internet. And they really had a lot of mind share. They were leading edge in that space. So they do a good job of supporting HTTP and FTP and SMTP, etc. They do a good job of supporting standard encryption technologies such as SSL or X509 v3 certificates. Okay? And they do a good job of supporting XML externally. Okay? Now, these products still, though, are very immature. I mean, these products are feature poor, which is different. So, I mean, immature in that, some of them aren't that stable. And a lot of them are missing huge pieces of functionality that you would just expect in just about any enterprise product. So it's really fascinating to see that these organizations have been successful, even though they've got huge weaknesses.
But, so they're successful maybe in the smaller markets because they don't have these enterprise-ready features you're talking about.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because a lot of the new .coms, a lot of the new trading marketplaces are buying products like these, but they haven't pushed them up to high volumes yet. Right? I mean, it's interesting. We all know about hundreds of different marketplaces that are appearing in every different industry. Right? Every day, someone has a new press release about some new electronic marketplace that they're building. But the highest volume electronic marketplace today is only processing a couple thousand documents a day normally. Right? I'm sure there are a few here and there that are doing more, but there just aren't that many that are processing many documents. So these servers really have not been taxed yet.
All right, let's look at who the players are in this space then.
Okay? And this is actually in alphabetical order. The one that's got the most mind share in this space is webMethods with their B2B integrator product. I would say Bluestone and Xtricity are probably neck and neck for mind share after webMethods. On display, probably running in the last spot. But these are products that were built to support XML, and they really sell themselves as these newer market XML vendors, these B2B players.
Well, Kevin, tell me, why would Vignette, a content management company, acquire a B2B server company?
Okay, and actually that's a good question, and it's really reflective of the need to do integration, not only within organizations and for their own needs, but also in a package like a content package. Because, hey, if we think about content management, one of the most important things that a content management product must do is aggregate information in the right formats and make sure it's presented to the people that want to consume that information in the right formats. And so they can definitely use a product like On Display to bring information into their content management server in many different formats and make sure it gets converted into the right format so it can be aggregated and then provided back to the constituents. So that's very important.
All right, so let's look at the market direction in B2B servers.
Okay. Now, one of the things that's happening here, it's interesting because it's complementary to what's happening in the EAI space. The B2B players are saying, hey, we've got a lot of mind share doing B2B trading, but what we really don't do a good job of is doing those internal integration projects, handling those classic, high-volume, adapter-enabled, normally, internal integration projects. So what they're doing is they're saying, hey, how can we support strong adapter offerings so that we can connect applications more effectively together internally? What are some queuing mechanisms that we may need to support? So a lot of these B2B vendors only support HTTP, SMTP, FTP. And they're saying, hey, we also need to support technologies that work internally, such as queuing products like MQ Series or MSMQ, or direct object interfaces, to use DCOM, for example, or IOP in the Corba world. Okay, so that's another thing that they're doing. But interestingly, they, like the EAI players and the EDI players as well, are also saying, hey, in order to make this fundamentally easier for customers, we need to provide a comprehensive graphical business process integration environment in order to make this easier. So they, like the other players, are also moving in that direction.
All right, let's look at that fourth market segment, the workflow vendors. And this is a little unique because remember that orb that we had up here was off and separate from the rest of those market segments.
Right. Historically, the workflow products have not really been effectively integrated with the integration plumbing that really can be used effectively with it. Now, this is an interesting space, and Gartner and some of the other analysts as well have some very, very strong feelings about this space. The first thing that they will say, and we'll talk about the different categories here, the first thing that Gartner will say is that there is no such thing as a single workflow strategy. No organization should ever even try to have a single unified workflow strategy because it's impossible. And the reason is because there are many different types of workflow products, and different products really need different types of workflow functionality to do what they need to do. So the first category that Gartner cites is what they call business utility workflow. So these are general workflow products that try to connect applications together. Okay, so and these new products, frankly, I mean, most of these are still much less mature than some of the products such as the PC Docs, the Documentum, the document-based workflow products that probably we think of more readily when we think of workflow products. Which leads us to the second category, application-specific workflow. Application-specific workflow is workflow stuff that comes with an application. The stuff that's embedded in SAP or embedded in PeopleSoft or Oracle, or the stuff that, of course, is woven throughout Documentum or PC Docs to do document routing and management. Okay, so that's very specific to those products. The third category is what they call workflow for the masses. And this is general purpose workflow that can be used to automate people-based processes. What oftentimes people refer to as P2P integration, right? Person-to-person integration. And we're very strong in this space with the workflow capabilities built into Exchange. Lotus Notes is also very strong in this space, right? And so really that's kind of a third unique type of workflow.
So how does BizTalk play in this space?
Okay, well, and this is important to communicate, is that BizTalk is not a workflow product. Okay, so it can utilize workflow building blocks as building blocks within a longer running, more distributed business process. But the goal of BizTalk is not to be a workflow product in the traditional sense. Okay, so if we look across this list, BizTalk is much like a business utility workflow system in that we want to be very, very comprehensive, and we want to be able to define these distributed business processes that cross not only applications internally, but also cross organizational boundaries, and then really add those workflow processes that maybe have been defined in other products as building blocks within those long-running processes. So we don't compete directly in the workflow market. The bottom line is BizTalk plus the workflow capabilities, for example, in Exchange, really offer that complete offering to a customer.
So you're saying BizTalk could actually help orchestrate maybe an SAP workflow or a Lotus workflow. And so BizTalk is really, as I said earlier, it's a different product. It's bigger than just workflow.
Correct. It's more comprehensive.
Yeah.
And those are absolutely true statements, but as well, you could define a business process within BizTalk orchestration, and you could call an Exchange workflow. So for example, you've got a business process, and a vice president decides that, instead of just rejecting orders from customers that are above their credit limit, we've got this process whereby we can authorize orders for that customer if it's a strategic customer, even above their credit limit. And so within a BizTalk defined business process that goes across many applications internally, the order processing system, the accounting system, the management system, you may choose to incorporate a little workflow defined in Exchange to authorize an order that a customer has placed with you, even if they're above their credit limit. That might be an example.
All right, let's take a look now at the orbs again, but now we've moved them into a different orientation to show where the market is today. Why don't you talk us through that? And they're different sizes, too.
Right. Now, the EDI market, as we talked about, from a product standpoint, this market is starting to shrink. The EAI products are still going strong. So those products from a dollar perspective are still growing. Now, the ones that really have the most mind share and are growing the fastest are the B2B players. And all of these are indeed coming together. So they're all kind of coming into this middle space that really represents this more holistic approach to doing integration. A more holistic approach that allows organizations to integrate their business processes, not only within, but also between organizations, which does include, of course, having a number of different systems cooperate within your organization and across your trading network.
So what are the analysts calling that space?
So this kind of holy grail of integration, you might say, is being referred to as the integration broker space by Gartner. Giga calls this Internet Application Integration. And we're really giving this space a new name because we think it's actually even more than the way they define it. And we're calling this space the orchestration server space. So this is really our opportunity to go out there and define a new space and say, here are the unique capabilities that we can give to customers by defining this new type product.
Yeah, and so that's really marketing 101, is to go out and define a new space, not only with a name, but with a product that can go in and become the #1 product in that space and dominate. And that's our goal, right?
Absolutely. This is a tactic that you can use. You can go into your customer sites and you can say, in order to allow customers to achieve the important business objectives of, for example, reducing business process cycle times for all business processes, for making sure the right information gets presented to the right people at the right time in the right format to make better decisions, to allow people to establish and leverage dynamic business relationships more effectively, you really need this comprehensive and integrated integration environment to do that. And there are some unique characteristics of this, and we're referring to this as the orchestration server space.
So how much money is on the table here, Kevin?
There's a lot of money on the table. So this is measured in millions. Even the most pessimistic organization, Gartner, is suggesting that last year there was about $468 million worth of product sold in this space. Be about $800 million this year, and $1.3 billion by 2002. And they're actually the most pessimistic of the organizations that track this space.
So sounds like there's some money to go after. You have a product.
Absolutely.
How do you talk to a customer about the BizTalk Server 2000?
I think the easiest way to approach the positioning of what the product does is that, once again, going back to the business requirements, if the goal is to get fundamentally easier to integrate business processes and services, not only within, but also between organizations, there are three kind of distinct layers of capabilities you need. One is you need a communication medium. We need a common communication medium so that the right info can zing over the wire, not only internally, but once again, across the internet between organizations. You also need a bunch of plumbing. The plumbing needed to transform data, for example, back and forth between different formats, and encrypt it and decrypt it, etc. But you really need this extra layer on top, this graphical business process modeling environment that allows people to define their business processes really from a business analyst perspective. You shouldn't have to stand in front of a whiteboard and try to educate all of the IT pros on the way the process looks so they can then go build something that's completely different than what you've told them, right? So we want to try to bring those people together by allowing the business analyst to define the process themselves. So what are those layers? Well, we kind of take the communication medium for granted, right? Internet technologies allow us to do that integration on the same technology on a TCP/IP basis, internally or externally. At the integration layer, there are a whole bunch of types of plumbing that you need. The data transmission and routing, as I mentioned, encryption and decryption, the ability to digitally sign information, the ability to connect between applications either synchronously or asynchronously, lots of different types of services that are required.
What do we call that?
So we refer to those as the BizTalk messaging services. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of plumbing that collectively we refer to as BizTalk messaging. Now at the orchestration layer, what do you want to be able to do? The business analyst wants to be able to connect various applications together from the perspective of looking at their ERP system or their knowledge management system or their customer relationship management system. So you really need that separate environment to do that, and that's the BizTalk orchestration environment.
Okay, and together
those make up the server.
All right.
So even though we refer to these as two different sets of services, they are integrated and they both are in the BizTalk server box. And they provide the different layers of services, you might say, that represent that holistic approach to integration.
So this is really the differentiation then. We've got the messaging and the orchestration together in one box, and that's really what makes this product go.
Correct. This is a big competitive advantage for us.
Okay. So how do we position it?
Okay.
Give you one slide.
One slide.
Position
So
the
the
product.
one slide positioning of BizTalk Server is that it allows customers to quickly build dynamic business processes. Processes that are going to change over time and sometimes change very rapidly. It allows customers to very easily integrate applications but also trading partners. Once again, that holistic look to the process.
Yeah, excuse me, and we saw this in the keynote this morning, how easy it was to build that graphical model of what was going on. Changes to it.
Well, that's great. I'm glad it was shown. I was asleep. So, did everybody see that demo this morning? Was it good? Good demo? Okay, good. So, yeah, BizTalk orchestration is definitely an exciting environment, and that's where business processes start in the BizTalk world. So, third, it allows you to ensure reliable and secure document exchange. And in this context, these are not marketing words. They are features that support reliable delivery of messages and secure delivery of messages. So those are our features. And our architecture is sound enough that we can provide it within the scalability requirements for some of the largest organizations.
Now, I know when I'm in the briefing center talking to large customers, they usually have an EDI implementation. They've had it for years. And maybe they've got some EAI stuff and workflow. And they always ask me, well, so Alan, is BizTalk trying to replace EDI? You know, what's your positioning with EDI, EAI, B2B? And so we thought it would be good to take you through, the audience, take you through the positioning against those different spaces. And you'll notice some similarities here in the positioning against the various spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are the kind of 3 slides that give you an idea of how to approach this from a specific type of product perspective. So if the customer says, well, you know, we already know EDI. I mean, we've got EDI, and you know, especially if you talk to the EDI manager, they're not necessarily going to be that open to talking to you about BizTalk. Those aren't the people you necessarily want to be selling to. You want to be selling to the people that have ownership of the e-commerce, for example, efforts across the organization, or the B2B efforts. But it's important to stress that BizTalk is not an EDI server. BizTalk supports EDI document formats. We support the ability to transform data back and forth into and out of EDI document formats. But it's not an EDI server. And it is an important distinction, even though it's subtle.
Now, there's the other distinction, too, because I always tell customers, we're not trying to replace your EDI system, but if you have new projects that require integration, use BizTalk Server. Don't go back and do another EDI project.
Right. That's actually a very good point, where the goal with BizTalk is to complement, it's to leverage organizations' existing EDI investments. So basically, the situation here is we can drop an integration server in there that allows them to utilize those EDI investments, to use those EDI systems, but when they want to do more holistic integration projects, we want BizTalk to be considered as a better place to do that. And it is kind of conceptually similar to the PC mainframe type of phenomenon. When PCs came along, or more generally, the Intel-based, commodity-based architecture, when that came along, did mainframes go away? Absolutely not. But once organizations put in PC-based platforms based on that architecture, when organizations needed to do new line of business applications, what platform did they do it on? They did it on the PC-based platform. Why? Better economics, better tools, better available applications. We see a similar situation here. By dropping in this integration server that can leverage EDI and complement it, we can take advantage of those investments, but when they want to do new integration projects, whether they're internal or external or a combination, BizTalk's going to be a more effective environment to do that in.
Okay, let's look at the EAI space and how we position against EAI.
Okay. Once again, focusing on what EAI does well. EAI does a good job of integrating applications together within the firewall. So we want to say, hey, this product does EAI. We provide EAI functionality. So it handles the EAI tasks. But it goes beyond that. It also provides the B2B capabilities, but just as importantly, if not more so, it also provides the graphical business process modeling environment, BizTalk orchestration, to tie it all together. Right? So it's a superset, you might say, of what the EAI boxes provide.
And there's some good products in this space. So if we go BizTalk Server and try and compete head-to-head with an EAI project, it's going to be tough, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So what do? You want to paint a bigger picture.
Yeah, you want to flank, you might say, from a strategic standpoint. You want to say, hey, look, I appreciate that maybe your project today is only wiring applications X, Y, and Z together within the firewall. But as you move your business forward, as you define new trading partner relationships, don't you want to be able to define distributed business processes, no matter where trading entities exist, within an easier to use environment? So you want to blow this up and say, hey, isn't this what you really want to be doing long term to maintain your competitiveness? And that is an argument that will be accepted quite readily by the upper management of the organization.
So these arguments are common, really, between EDI and EAI.
They're similar. Yes.
Very similar.
The first one,
There's
absolutely.
some subtle differences here, but they're similar.
Yeah, the first point is that we do want to make it clear that what we're offering is more comprehensive. It's a superset of a specific EDI product or a specific EAI product. Or frankly, a specific B2B product as well, which we'll see in a future slide.
All right, let's look at B2B positioning then.
Okay, so the B2B positioning is, once again, similar in the beginning, is that yes, we can handle your B2B needs, arguably better than any of the other existing B2B products actually. So we stack up very well from that standpoint in a B2B space. Okay? But we go beyond that. We can also handle the internal integration requirements and, once again, the graphical environment, BizTalk orchestration, to tie it all together. So the second bullet is similar as well, because we support transports and data formats that allow you to do that integration on either side of the firewall. Right? So we support XML, which is almost a requirement today to go B2B, but we also can transform back and forth to various esoteric flat file formats, so you can integrate with the mainframe, for example, internally. Okay? So also, it's important that, interestingly, the B2B products, even though they do a good job of supporting XML as a data format, and even though they support, for example, HTTP and others as transports, these products are very proprietary. So every single one of them has a highly proprietary internal data representation. They provide proprietary internal data stores, etc., which we'll talk about more in a moment. So it's important to stress that Microsoft BizTalk Server has been built from the ground up based on standards. So our internal data representation, for example, is XML. For data transformation, we use XSL. Right? So there are some important points there.
And that's important because if developers want to get in there and look at the code in a proprietary engine, that's hard to do, but with BizTalk, it's all in XML and XSL.
Correct. Difficult and sometimes impossible. So with some of our competitors' products, for example, they might do a transformation between two different data formats, and what the tool generates more often than not is some sort of proprietary transformation code that sometimes they don't even have access to. They cannot even read. Whereas we generate XSL, standard XSL that we use to transform documents between different formats.
All right, now this is where we need your help in the audience. We're going to take a look now at product-specific positioning, take a look at the individual products. How many out here have had hands-on with IBM MQ Integrator? Okay, we would love to talk to you after the show here. Just give us your business card or send us an email. We need your help. Okay? We need to pick your brain, understand what you know about the product, what the strengths, weaknesses are, etc. So we've done our best to tell you what it is here, and you can help us add to this.
Okay. So start with MQ Integrator. We're going to cover 4 or 5 competitors at a pretty high level. We've also created a competitive repository that we'll give you a point or two later as well. But MQ Integrator is basically IBM's EAI offering. It originally came from Neon. That relationship is starting to crumble a bit right now. So Neon is actually now going off in their own direction and offering their own EAI products. MQ Integrator is the data transformation and routing engine that sits on top of MQ Series as a transport and also can work with MQ Workflow as a people-based workflow product. They runs on about 5 different platforms, supports many databases. And they also do provide some industry-specific support. For example, the gold standard in the financial industry, or SWIFT, also in financial securities. Now, a few issues that you will run into with MQ Integrator is, even when doing some relatively simple transformations between document formats, oftentimes you do have to write code. And so you are relegated to, to oftentimes, for example, C++ type of environment in order to write that. So you can't, for example, do that in script. For business process integration, they use this MQ Workflow product. Technology they licensed from Flowmark. Actually, I think they acquired Flowmark. They do support publish and subscribe capabilities fairly well. There is no native support for COM, though. So for organizations that do want to easily connect to COM-based applications, there's no simple way to do that. And they really are the king of the hill in the EAI space. So they lead the EAI market, not only in mind share, but also in gross dollar value. So just about by any of the studies today.
All right, let's take a look at how you'd position against MQ Integrator with BizTalk Server.
Okay. The first thing I would do is I would communicate that BizTalk, once again, is a more holistic integration approach. MQ Integrator is very good at internal application integration, but it doesn't handle B2B out of the box at all. Okay, and so IBM has been making noise about the new WebSphere B2B integrator effort that they have going. They made an announcement earlier this year. They made another announcement 2 days ago. They licensed Xtricity's technology to do B2B integration. So we see that IBM is scrambling as well to have a good B2B story. And instead of building that capability into that MQ stack, what they're doing is they're acquiring other technology and creating a separate product.
But this is important because if you're in a true blue shop, all blue shop, they're going to look to MQ Integrator to solve their needs.
Absolutely. If you're approaching a customer and they have MQ Series running, they support 35 platforms with MQ Series. If you approach a customer and they're running MQ Series already as their transport infrastructure across the entire enterprise, this is going to be a logical and appropriate consideration for them. And so the positioning of the far more comprehensive offering that we have is going to be a strong point. But to be frank as well, IBM will start to tell that story better. And so that will be a tough sell.
Well, and also my experience in the IBM space is that they tend to wrap a lot of services around this stuff to get it to work.
Absolutely. Yeah, the other benefits that you'll have here, the other positioning strong points you have are the kind of classic Microsoft positioning strong points around our business model, our partnering model, et cetera, which we didn't list here. But you're going to want to rely on those if you go against IBM in this environment. It's also interesting. There was a gentleman that attended our session yesterday on this, and he has a lot of experience with IBM, so it was very, very useful to get his perspective on this. And his position was the tying of MQ Integrator to MQ Series is actually a strength, right? And so his approach, once again, this seasoned IBM approach, is that he felt very comfortable going into customers and saying, yes, you can get a lot of value out of MQ Integrator, and it's actually a strength that we require MQ Series because it's just installed. And if you want to do B2B trading with your customers, just tell them to install MQ Series. Right? So that's what IBM reps will tell customers. They'll say, no problem. You want to do B2B trading with MQ Integrator? Just have your customers install MQ Series on their end, adapt their applications to speak MQ Series, and then open up those ports on your firewall to speak MQ Series. So IBM will tell customers that. And as we all know, and as you know, as one, I know in your experience in talking to customers, as well as mine, customers want to make it as easy as possible to do business with them. They don't want to have to tell their trading partners to install any specific piece of software to trade with them. Would you agree with that,
Yeah.
Alan? Okay, so, but you're going to hear that from IBM.
Okay, now the next company we're going to look at is Web Methods, and it's interesting. We had a gentleman join us yesterday who came from Compaq. And he was able to give us a lot of this Web Methods information because he's actually worked with the product. So again, information coming out of the field is tremendously valuable and allows us to distribute it to a large audience. So again, your help is much asked for here and much needed. How many people are dealing with Web Methods, competing against Web Methods out there today? Okay, a few. How many people are working with Web Methods and could help us with some more info?
Any of you have used the product?
Okay.
Yeah, not surprising.
All right.
You will run into Web Methods more and more, though. As you talk to customers, and customers are wanting to do B2B trading over the internet, Web Methods has a lot of mind share in the space. So you will run into them more and more.
All right, Kevin, why don't you take us through Web Methods and what you know about them so far?
Okay. So once again, this information came from a gentleman who works in MCS Houston. He was a lead architect at Compaq for a number of years. He has a lot of experience implementing Web Methods. And it was very, very interesting to get his insight into the rather profound weaknesses of this product. The strength from a Web Method standpoint is that they indeed were one of the first organizations to go out there and really effectively communicate an XML-based vision for B2B trading. Did a very, very good job of this. So they have a lot of mind share. And their market valuation, frankly, really reflects that, even though they're still a very small company and not even close to being profitable. They have established relationships with many services organizations. Once again, a lot of those services organizations have established relationships with Web Methods because they were one of the only companies out there really telling a good B2B story.
But our friend, the consultant, said that when he finally went to the actual companies that had the Web Methods logo, that there was, when he got the stuff out of the box, there really wasn't any connection there, right?
Yeah, very good point. Not only did a lot of the services organizations that he talked to really not have much experience with the product, it was more of a marketing-based relationship, but a lot of the actual more tangible products, for example, like Ariba or Commerce One, Web Methods puts all over their materials that they natively support CXML. They natively support CBL. In reality, they don't at all. They don't provide any out-of-the-box support. Their definition of natively support CXML or CBL is simply that they support XML. And say, hey, we can process XML documents, therefore we natively support these libraries. So there's a lot of, there's a bit of miscommunication around that, and they did want to integrate with some of those libraries, and they had to do all of that work themselves.
And so this is also classic of the B2B space, is that they don't have the enterprise class features in there as well.
They actually don't. It's actually surprising, some of the features that Web Methods does not have.
No queuing. That's hard to believe.
No queuing mechanism. They have no built-in queue. So for example, with BizTalk Server, if I want BizTalk Server to process a document for me as part of a longer-running business process, I can submit a document or a batch of documents to the queue. It goes into SQL Server as that shared queue. Then there can be an array of BizTalk servers, and so the next one that has worker threads available can pull items off of that queue to process it. Web Methods has no queue. And so if you want Web Methods to process a document for you, you have to submit it synchronously to the service. You sit there and you wait until the service takes the document, does the transformation, processes it, and gives you a return code. So very inefficient. Surprising how inefficient that architecture is, and it's obviously a big gap. They also provide no transaction support. So when somebody walks into the room and unplugs that computer, of course, to do a good job of sweeping behind the system, your transactions are gone. There is no transaction support in the system. Their answer, no problem, we support transactions. All you have to do is write some Java in order to handle that for you. You can use a number of different types of services. You have to write all that code yourself in Java in order to support transactions. So you're doing all that infrastructure development yourself. There's no built-in clustering, no built-in failover, no built-in load balancing. Their answer to that, and actually a related issue, is that whenever documents are being processed by the server, they store the state information in an internal binary store on that physical computer. So once again, you pull the plug, you lose the document because there's no transaction support, but it also means they can't cluster systems together really effectively because there isn't shared state that allows them to have, for example, 6 systems all behaving as a virtual system that are pulling off of that shared queue.
That hurts the scalability story, then.
It really kills the scalability story. It's interesting that Ed said, we were really limited. Unless we wanted to do months and months and months of development on our own, we were limited to 1 production server. We couldn't use multiple production servers with this software. Right? Now, they will sell an add-on. What they do is they'll say, oh, we do support failover. All you have to do is buy this add-on for 6 figures. You buy the add-on, and what it allows you to do is it's a connector. It's basically a JDBC connector for their internal binary state storage. Then, if you want any of the that's basically the state for the documents that are flowing to the server to be put into that store, you have to write all the code yourself. So by buying this failover adapter, you earn the right to write a lot of Java code to store the state for documents that come to the server in that shared state store that can be in any, of course, database that you can access through JDBC. Okay, so not a good story.
Let's look at some more stuff here.
Okay, surprisingly, once again, for a company that does such a good job of selling the B2B story, of selling their support for XML, it's interesting to see that they are proprietary really from top to bottom. So for example, the way that they represent data internally is based on a nested hash table technology based in Java. So for example, since we support XML very, very well, you have the standard DOM-based interfaces, SACS-based interfaces to XML data as it flows to the server. SACS, of course, moving forward based on our newer XML technology. They have no support for the DOM or SACS or anything like that. They basically, whenever they bring data into the server, they convert it into this internal nested hash table chaos kind of stuff, and then you have to write code against this Java API in order to access information in this really highly complex hash table format. So it's very difficult even to access the data. So even simple transformations oftentimes require a ton of work.
So Kevin, there's a lot of stuff here, and it looks like it'd be pretty easy to position BizTalk against Web Methods.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, you know what? I hate to do that, but there's a few other things I do want to mention just because there's just such good stuff here. The
Just
data
trying to keep you on
transformation mechanism.
time.
I appreciate that, Alan. That is required most of the time. The data transformation mechanism, once again, we use XSL. They use an XSL-like proprietary language. As I mentioned, their internal storage is proprietary. They also have a language, and this does deserve mention. This is why I did want to pause on this slide for a moment. Is that web methods will say, oh, BizTalk, they have BizTalk orchestration. We've got the same type of language. It's called Flow, right? So they have a language called Flow that describes the steps for processing a document. However, it's like, how many of you have experience with the Commerce Interchange pipeline in Site Server Commerce Edition version 3? It's basically the CIP editor. That's what it is. It allows you to define the serial steps that are required in order to perform a transformation on a business document. You can link different steps together. Those steps, of course, you write yourself in Java, right? But basically, you can say, I want this transformation to occur, and then this other transformation, and then I want you to run this Java component, and then this Java component, and then this Java component. If you want any type of logic to be executed, you have to write all that code yourself. So it's not nearly the scope of what we're doing in BizTalk orchestration. It's a simple environment for defining serial steps for processing a document when it's submitted to the server. Okay? So another strength is that they do sell this appliance model. So they have, for example, an HTTP listener built into the box. They have an SMTP listener built into the box. So I think we could position that obviously as a strength, as a weakness of theirs, but they position it as a strength because they refer to this as this all-in-one appliance. We provide the web services, right? It's built into the integration server, so it's an XML appliance, and so it allows them to tell actually a decent story, even though technically it might not be that graceful. Okay.
So now let's look at the positioning.
Okay, so the positioning. I would, first of all, start with, this product, and of course, we're not suggesting that you attack using these words exactly, but just to give you this information so you can formulate your arguments. BizTalk Server has been built to support the important enterprise-ready types of capabilities you absolutely need. You need the clustering support. You need the transaction support. That's obviously critical, so your transactions are guaranteed. You need the queuing support. You need all these industrial strength capabilities. WebMethods just doesn't have them out of the box. I obviously would stress that Microsoft BizTalk Server has been built on standards from top to bottom. We use XML as our internal canonical representation of data. We have XSL as our standard way to transform data. We allow you to access that data using DOM, and moving forward using SACS, for example. Right? So we use standards. We store all of the information in a relational database that you can access who you want. Okay? So it's a very open story there. And the other issue that I would stress, frankly, is that we provide the support environment, you might say. Not only high-quality support from our support services, but also the documentation, all of the organizations that can provide training, right, all of that. It's really, Ed mentioned that these are incredibly poor with web methods. The sales rep who sold them the technology actually was the person who did the technical training. And it wasn't the best technical training they've ever received. So you'll see that a lot with web methods.
All right, let's take a look at TIBCO. I think that's the next one. And again, how many folks out there have used TIBCO?
Any of you actually use TIBCO? Okay.
Got one hand back there.
All right.
This information comes from Jeremy Lehman. He works here at Microsoft, and he is a certified TIBCO expert, right?
Correct.
So again, the field once again helped us put this information together, and we appreciate that. If the gentleman in the back that raised his hand has more, we'd love to know about it.
Okay. TIBCO is a classic EAI player. They've been in that space a long time. They're very mature, very high performance, very popular on Wall Street. They pretty much own the financial sector. Much like Vitria owns the telco sector, TIBCO owns the financial sector. They were actually purchased by Reuters, and they have a number of different products that are specific to the financial industry. Now, the more general integration product we're going to compete against is Active Enterprise. The session's over at 1:30, right? No, I'm sorry, 12:30. 12:30, right, okay. Yeah. 20 more minutes. Okay. I'm sorry? We will. We'll have, we'll rush through this. Okay, we have 20 minutes, right? Okay, just want to make sure. So strengths, very wide installed base, very strong services organization. They can come in there and they can implement it very, very quickly. They do everything at the command line, and it's very, very hard to use, but their organization is very strong. And as we mentioned, they have a lot of vertical depth in adapters and consulting for the financial industry. Now, another weakness, or the weaknesses start with their proprietary nature. Once again, this is fairly common across most of the classic EAI players. They provide a completely proprietary stack of technologies, all the way down to the wire format. And so the way they represent data, they provide their own message transport. Okay? Everything is proprietary to TIBCO. They're very behind on their XML support, and as a result of that, they purchased extensibility a few months ago. So it will allow them to tell a good story for their support for XML because of that commitment. But the product today does not support XML really hardly at all. They can do basic transformation back and forth to XML, but it's very, very painful. It's a very complex product where in order to do kind of an end-to-end integration project, you have to install many different products, these different daemons that are going to run, distributed on many different boxes, so it's very complex. And also, it really requires that you have rocket scientist, network specialists on board to do the project, because unless you really design your network and you subnet it exactly right, you could have a complete meltdown with the TIBCO architecture because of the way they used UDP to broadcast information all over the place. So instead of having a publish and subscribe mechanism whereby people can go and pull information based on the subjects they're interested in, it's UDP based where it broadcasts out the information, and then the ones that want it then grab it.
Well, Kevin, you mentioned yesterday that you need to, part of the TIBCO training is that you get network protocol training.
They start with network training.
Right.
So when you go to a TIBCO training course, they start with the alphabet soup of network protocols that you need to be an expert in. So it's pretty painful. Okay. And also, there is information. My favorite piece of anecdotal information on this is that there is an organization on Wall Street that is being charged $1,000 per user per month by TIBCO. So per user on the network that's actually accessing information in their publish and subscribe system.
So hence the disliked by customers.
So yeah, they're not too happy about that.
Yeah.
So they're looking for anything they can get their hands on that allows them to do this in a more open, more standard way. I'll move through these pretty quickly, but just to give you an example of what we're talking about here. The TIBCO Active Enterprise product is based on a historic technology they refer to as TIBCO Rendezvous. And so RVD stands for Rendezvous Daemon. So if I just have two simple computers on a LAN that want to send data back and forth, I need the Rendezvous Daemon on both. So I need to install that software. Now, if I want to be able to then subsequently send information over a WAN, well, I need another piece of software. I need the Rendezvous remote daemon. Okay? And then I can set up, for example, interest lists and things like that that listen for certain UDP traffic to grab what I want. Okay, now, if I want to be able to communicate reliably, oh, that's an extra product. That's an extra daemon, the Rendezvous Certified Messaging daemon. And it really goes on and on and on. If I want to go over the web, I need another daemon. Right? If I want to be able to transform data from one format to another, I've got to install a whole different product, the actual message broker engine, and I need to put that on all of the systems that may possess adapters in order to convert that data. Okay? If I want to be able to do any type of workflow, internal workflow type of process, this environment, I need another product. I need the integration manager, and that's for their more general workflow product. And if I want to handle people-based workflow, right, then I have to once again install In Concert, which they acquired last year and really isn't integrated with the rest of their stuff today. Okay, so lots of complexity. It looks a little messy, doesn't it? And really that's the way it ends up, is that you kind of have to be a TIBCO rocket scientist to really have this down. Okay, so they have lots of different types of tools that do some of the same stuff. And so, for example, they have one transformation tool. Looks like it's mapping out a kind of workflow, a pseudo workflow process up there. You've got a different product to do more general workflow between applications. You've got a different product that looks pretty similar to do people-based workflow. This is based on the In Concert technology, right? And they've got a different GUI to basically map out the kind of administration from a pseudo workflow type of environment. So you have lots of different tools that don't necessarily interact that well together. And so even, for example, per comments made by Jeremy, a certified network TIBCO engineer, that if I have a document go from one end of my trading relationship to the other end, if something falls apart in between, sometimes it's nearly impossible just to figure out what happened because of all the communicating daemons that you need to sort through and all the different data stores you need to sort through to figure out what happened to that document. So pretty classic situation here where the TIBCO technology is pretty old. It's very complex. Once again, the proprietary issues are what we should hit on with TIBCO, and it's just really hard to use and implement, and hard as in difficult, but also expensive.
Okay. Well, that sounds like Demon Hill to me.
Yeah, it indeed is.
Sorry. Okay.
So that was good, Alan.
Yeah, let's take a look at Oracle. Now, I've done a little research here, and again, this is where we could use your help. If anybody has experience out there with the Oracle product in this integration space, we'd love to talk to you. And actually, we had a gentleman come up after the presentation yesterday and give us some good info.
Alan, I think you've done more work in this space than I have, so why don't you tell them a little bit about Oracle Integration Server?
Well, this is just a screen scrape off the website that shows the different components in the product offering, Integration Server. But the interesting thing is you can't go buy Integration Server. It's not a SKU. They bundled it in with the Oracle Integration or Internet Application Server. So it's a bundle.
Isn't that a bundle as well, though?
Yeah. So we've got a lot of bundling going on here, and I think the marketing folks have been at work at Oracle. So it's formally called the E-Business Integration Server or the Integration Portal Server. But it's basically what they've done is taken some old technologies, some friendly, familiar technologies, and thrown them in a bag and shaken them up, and now it's called Oracle Integration Server. They've also had a June announcement with Web Methods. So, gosh, we've got this integration server, and now they're partnering with Web Methods to do integration activities. So we're kind of confused what's going on there. But given the track record that Oracle has with their partners, we question whether that relationship will last very long. And so maybe the partnering with Web Methods is just an interim solution. So if you have any ideas there or any knowledge, we'd love to know about that.
So now, when did we first hear about Oracle Integration Server? Like late last year or so?
Right, November timeframe, they put out a press release.
And so have they really said anything about it since then? What can you find out about it on their website?
Well, it's hard to find much. Basically what we see here. And there's some white papers that are very vague about what's going on with the product, and they allude to these graphical modeling tools that no one can really find.
Okay, so it sounds like it's a marketing bundle. It takes a whole bunch of technologies that do exist within the Oracle world, and it's saying our Oracle Integration Server really is all of these technologies put together, even though you can't buy the Oracle Integration Server.
Right.
Is that true? Okay.
Now, also, I talked with a former employee of Oracle, and he said that he was actually familiar with the people working on this product, and that it constantly was put on the shelf and taken back off the shelf and then put back on, and he finally left the company in frustration because he really believed in that product, but they kept playing with it from a management standpoint. So I imagine there's some internal turmoil going on there as well.
Okay.
And the key here, though, is you bundle all this stuff together, you shake the bag up, and you have a new product, and the way you complete the offering is you wrap services around it, which, as we know, Oracle is great at doing. And if you look at their latest financials, 56% of all Oracle revenue comes from the service arena. So they'd be glad to sell you a marketing bundle and then wrap a ton of services around it to make this thing really work.
Okay. Actually, one of the specific technologies, as part of the server, don't they say they provide data transformation and routing services? I mean, something that's arguably one of the most critical applications of the server. I mean, is that real, or is that another repackaged technology, or what are they talking about?
That's something they call the transparent gateway technology.
Okay.
And it's analogous with our own data transformation services, I think.
Okay, so they've got a data transformation services-like set of services they use to get data in and out of Oracle, the database, so they can do bulk conversion of data formats. And they're saying, oh, this is, well, see, we have data transformation and routing capabilities. This is this piece of technology over here.
So, but it's not nearly what is in
square peg, round hole.
Right. Okay. And then also we've talked to people who have actually tried to use their workflow builder, and they said it's very hard to use. It's a graphical environment, and so they can claim this business process modeling environment with this workflow builder thing. But the reality, from what we hear of people who have actually developed with it, is that you have to write a ton of code to hook all these pieces together, unlike what we saw with BizTalk Server, where we really truly can orchestrate something.
And is there any evidence that the Oracle Workflow product allows you to define business processes that cross organizational boundaries?
That's not clear to me, no.
Okay. Okay, great.
Yeah, so again, if you have more information, we'd love to know about it. Let's move on and take a look.
So how would you position this, Alan?
Okay. We believe they have no true integration offering. However, They are marketing this really strong behind their electronic marketplaces, and they're saying that the integration server is the back end for their electronic marketplaces. So it's very dangerous from a marketing standpoint, but we're not sure how much is really there. Again, requires a lot of services, but we believe BizTalk server is completely different, and really, you know, Oracle is trying to put together an answer for BizTalk server, I think, here.
So what I might suggest there, might it be a good approach, Alan, to approach a customer and say, hey, you know, we think that it's important before you invest in any technology to do a very small pilot where each organization, each competing organization proves and demonstrates how you can easily set up a process that exchanges a document that crosses organizational boundaries. And say, hey, we'll just bring a couple people in here, take a few days, and show a purchase order being created and transformed and then sent over HTTP to a business partner. Might that be a good challenge for Oracle?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be great, and BizTalk server could really shine in that environment.
So they would be forced to really show up and fall on their face because they really have no product they can install and get this working quickly.
Right.
Okay?
All right, let's look at Sun.
All right, last couple of slides, and then we'll spend the last time on discussion. So Sun does have an offering in the space. It's the Forte Fusion and then Forte Conductor offering. They acquired this technology. They bought Forte last year, early last year or so, as many of you may already know. The Forte Fusion product is actually quite strong. It wins product reviews on a regular basis, so it's very good. It's pretty much the only competitor that we compete against that actually uses XML as their internal data representation. So, interestingly, they have a really good story there. They also support XSL. So once again, they're our only competitor that supports XML as the internal data format and uses XML for data transformation. They do use DTDs to describe their XML documents.
Now, tell me about that, Kevin. Isn't that an issue, using DTDs?
Yeah, this is a tough issue, and it is a little dangerous because they will sell it as we support standards. And the DTD method, document type descriptions, the way to describe a valid XML document, is the only standard way to describe XML documents today until XML schema becomes ratified. XML schema, the XSD work being that's going on in the W3C is not indeed a recommendation yet. We expect it to be around the end of the year or so, but it's not a recommendation. So Sun will say, we support standards, we support DTD. When XML schema indeed becomes a recommendation, we will support it.
Now, aren't they also saying Microsoft doesn't support DTDs yet, do they?
Right. So what they'll say is that Microsoft does not support standards because Microsoft supports their proprietary schema technology called XML Data Reduced. Right? And this is really a double-edged sword because our story there is we are just as committed. We're just as committed. We're actually more committed than Sun to supporting XML schema. Our efforts in the W3C, our contributions to the XML schema effort within the W3C demonstrate that. And we're using XDR today to give customers the benefits of XML schema, support for data typing, support for XML namespaces, support for an extensive build model.
Now, wait a sec. You mean those aren't in DTDs?
Those are not in DTDs.
So that's why we're going with XDR today. So
that's where we're going with XDR today.
But what happens when they finally get this spec baked?
Okay, then we're going to provide a seamless migration path for customers. Technically, you can take an XDR schema, and by applying an XSL transform to it, you can convert it to an XML schema, an XSD schema document with no loss.
Great. So when do we expect that the XML schema definition will be out? Do we know?
That we think that XML schema will indeed become a recommendation around the end of the year, early next year. But since it's not a recommendation yet, we're going to ship a product today that provides customers the benefits of XML schema and provides them a seamless migration path to XML schema when it becomes a standard.
Okay, and that's an important point. I hear that a lot in the briefing center, people asking for clarification on that, because the press picks up a story and says, Microsoft, there they go again. They're off on a proprietary path. And really what we're trying to do is get people to be able to work today with XML and then a migration path when the spec's fully baked, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So just functionally, a few other comments. They do support a number of different transport protocols. They do support COM natively. They support IOP in the Corba world, support RMI in the EJB world as a very object access technology. They support Java messaging service. Okay, they support HTTP, so they're pretty strong on the transport front. They run a number of different platforms against a number of different databases. So they actually have a good cross-platform story here. Once again, because they did all this work before they were acquired by Sun, naturally. They also have the conductor product that does workflow. But any participating application in a conductor managed workflow process requires an adapter in order to participate in that overall process. And in order to work with the product, the thing that they recommend is to write code in their language called Tool in order to actually, for example, do user exits and things like that. And so, so there are some proprietary aspects of the product, but in general, it's a pretty strong offering.
All right, so how do we position against the strong offering?
Okay. Today, the way I would position it is that Fusion and Conductor are good at integrating processes internally. You don't necessarily have to complement them if you don't want to, but they are definitely focused on integration of processes internally, but they're not effective at supporting B2B processes like BizTalk Server. So even when I said earlier that they support HTTP, interestingly, they use HTTP internally, okay, but there is no evidence that they can utilize HTTP based in their business process environment. So you can't, for example, define a process in Conductor and say, oh, by the way, I want to post this document using HTTP across the internet to do such and such. You can't manage that within the Conductor environment, even though you can use that plumbing within Forte Fusion. And so I would I would somehow work in the fact that they use proprietary development technologies in order to make everything work. And frankly, all of their plans moving forward are to invest in Java-based investments in this environment. And so based on our approach, our whole goal is to allow people to fundamentally more easily integrate systems together, independent of operating system, programming model, or programming language. And so unlike Sun, who really thinks that the way to do everything is to either rewrite it or wrap it in Java, we're really looking at more of that language indifferent type of approach.
All right, well, that wraps up the competition. Again, our plea for help. The competitive research in this area has just begun. You are our most valuable resource, so please forward competitive information to Catum Comp or questions to Catum Comp and Kevin McCall's alias there. And we'd be glad to take some questions from the microphone, Q&A available. We have competitive resources available, BizTalk Competitive Repository, the Catum HTTP competition, and then general BizTalk server materials, as you can see. Yes, we have a question here.
Where are we on the XForms standards track?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Where are we with respect to the XForms standards track?
Where are we in respect to the XForms standards track?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't know anything about XForms. I've heard of it, but I'm not smart on it.
Okay, thanks.
So I'd love to talk with you afterwards.
Just a question. What about positioning against Hewlett-Packard initiatives? They have lots of stuff in the same space.
You mean like eSpeak?
Yes, and
okay.
There's another workflow tool.
Change Engine?
Yes, right?
They have Change Engine. To be frank, we know very little about Change Engine. So that's something that we have to invest some resources to learn about. But eSpeak is pretty clear. eSpeak is a services-based model whereby an application that wants to make its services available needs to support a specific eSpeak services API. And so it requires either rewriting or wrapping an application with code so that it can expose its capabilities through this specific programmatic API. So in that way, and then there's a runtime layer, okay, that manages all these interactions. And so it's really more of a runtime set of software that must exist on any participating box, and all the applications must adapt to this API. So it's actually not competitive with BizTalk at all. It's totally orthogonal. As a matter of fact, they could use BizTalk as plumbing, make it easier to convert data back and forth to the format to access these services using the API. The most interesting thing about eSpeak, though, is it has absolutely no traction in the marketplace. And so you're not going to see any analysts or any press saying, hey, here's a customer that solved the business problem with eSpeak. So that's really the main thing I would suggest there. Is we haven't seen any eSpeak traction whatsoever. But in general, it is largely orthogonal to the BizTalk effort.
Okay, thank you. And just one more about the Sequoia portal server.
Portal server, right.
Yes, I didn't hear anything about it. But it stays strong in healthcare and use XML and BizTalk.
Right. The XML portal server, XML portal server in and of itself is not a competitor to BizTalk because the goal of the XML portal server, as you probably know, is to create a portal that's driven by XML technology to bring information together like in the healthcare industry. Like they've implemented the XML portal server at Baylor Medical Center and things like that. They're actually building some of their new technology on BizTalk. So BizTalk actually represents a set of services that Sequoia could use in their XML portal server so they don't have to actually provide all that data transformation and routing and orchestration plumbing in their box themselves. So they have had to do a lot of that work themselves historically because there weren't really good offerings available. But we're working very closely with Sequoia, and they want their future offerings to be based on the BizTalk platform. Right? So they'll just use us as plumbing to actually provide their value-added solution.
Next question, please.
Yeah. The question I have is, do you see BizTalk server playing at all in the EAI space, classic EAI space? Because we keep on losing to TIBCO and IBM MQ series integrator and Neon in that space.
Yeah, that's a good question. Oh, sorry.
Because BizTalk is weaker in that classic area. So do you ever see it moving strongly in there, or are you going to try and position it in the B2B space?
Right. Okay, so the question was, do we ever see ourselves, a couple of questions actually. One is that do we see ourselves moving into more aggressively the EAI space so that we can more effectively compete against the classic EAI vendors? There are a couple ways to answer that. First of all, I do want to stress, if BizTalk competes against a pure B2B server, we can kick them we can win. Okay? I mean, when you compare the B2B specific functionality in BizTalk against the B2B servers, we're superior. If you compare the EAI functionality in BizTalk server against the EAI vendors out there, that's going to be a much tougher battle. So it's important to stress that us against B2B vendors, we can win easily. Us against EAI is much tougher. Are going to continue to invest in putting more EAI functionality into the product. So for example, one of the things that's absolutely critical by launch is to have as many adapters available as possible for organizations so that organizations can use those application-specific adapters to connect applications. So we've got a whole team of people furiously working with application vendors, with ISVs, so when we launch, they can offer a BizTalk adapter with their software to customers. So that is something we're very, very serious about. And yes, we are continuing to invest in putting good EAI functionality in the box. However, what I would not say is that we're not moving in the EAI direction per se. The direction we're moving in is this kind of, moving, once again, more forward-looking in providing this holistic orchestration server that, yes, needs to address EAI challenges, but more importantly, needs to have all of these other characteristics that go way beyond the classic EAI definition.
Yeah, and I think that's how we're going to win, is to paint the bigger picture.
Absolutely.
I know right now it looks like we're losing, but...
The reason I asked that question is most of these financial institutions, like you said, they go purely for classic integration. But these competitors beat us in there. And of course, they are moving into this space as well, into B2B. So you find it becoming very difficult to really come long term, as well as solving the short-term problems that they are facing.
Well, if you're competing on a feature basis, I would agree, but that's not what I recommend. I mean, if you go in against an EAI product, if a customer says to you, sir, I'm going to do this internal project. I'm going to connect these three applications together. It's a total internal project. And they say, we'd like to evaluate BizTalk. If you subscribe to that competitive condition and you say, yes, we want to compete on that, and we'll show you BizTalk in the context of that defined project, and you don't try to communicate the more important, bigger issues, you'll probably lose. Because TIBCO and Vitria and IBM will beat you if you subscribe to, if you position BizTalk as an EAI server. So I agree with you that selling BizTalk against a classic EAI server to solve an EAI problem, that's going to be very hard, and you'll probably lose. And that's why, if that is indeed the issue, you need to do what I call a competitive flank. Instead of a frontal assault, and say, yes, we'll compete against that, and you do, instead of a frontal assault, which you will lose, you will be overpowered, you need to flank, and you need to say, well, don't you really want to consider a platform that can not only handle your internal integration requirements, but can also handle all of your cross-organizational integration requirements. Don't you want an environment where the business person, the person that knows the business process, can define a distributed business process that integrates any type of system, no matter where it exists across 2 or even more trading partners? I may have a shipping process, an order management and shipping process that goes across me as the selling organization, the buying organization, an independent third-party shipping organization, an independent organization to handle like the actual payment and the actual what's the word I'm losing? The actual the handling of all the financials as a separate organization, right? Yeah, the presentment and all that stuff. I mean, don't you want to be able to allow your business people to define that process across an arbitrary number of trading partners and have the integration environment look the same to you, no matter where those applications are, and you just use the right tools to get to those apps? That's what I'm suggesting, is that if you use that argument, the customer says, oh, yeah, I have to do B2B. I have to do that to be more competitive. And, of course, I want to make it easier on my people to define and manage these processes. Right? So if you bump it up to that level, then you can win that war by flanking.
All right, let's go to the next question.
Hi. How should we be positioning SOAP in relation to BizTalk, and do you see these 2 technologies converging in the future?
Yeah, great question. There are 2 ways that we could have supported SOAP in BizTalk 1, and we only support SOAP in one of these 2 ways, and there's a very good reason for it, so let me mention those. One way that BizTalk Server 1.0, BizTalk Server 2000 supports SOAP is that BizTalk Server 2000 supports the BizTalk framework, version 2.0, reliable, open messaging between servers. BizTalk framework is an XML-based communication protocol that's based on SOAP. So we took the SOAP headers and we took the SOAP infrastructure and we added BizTalk framework namespaces on top of that, 100% consistent with the SOAP model, and added things like reliable messaging, and we also can support things like multi-part MIME, encoding, and things like that. So by using the BizTalk framework, which is SOAP compliant, I can reliably exchange documents between any 2 servers that support BizTalk framework. So for example, it could be 2 BizTalk servers, or it could be a BizTalk server and a NetFish server and a WebMethod server that are all using BizTalk framework version 2 to communicate.
So Kevin,
so that's one way we support SOAP.
So you're saying that if we send out a BizTalk packet over the network, it's really a SOAP formatted packet?
Correct. It's a SOAP compliant message. It's formatted as a SOAP message, adding in the appropriate headers per the extensibility model that are perfectly acceptable to do that. So that's one way we support SOAP in BizTalk Server 2000. The other way we could have supported SOAP is that within the BizTalk orchestration environment, we could have had a binding shape that allowed you to drag a binding shape to the desktop and bind an activity in a defined business process to a SOAP service. So you could have said, here's my business process, here's an activity in that business process, that activity is actually going to be carried out by this SOAP service, and you could have bound that activity to the SOAP service. And we didn't do that in the release product, and here's why. Because we're kind of between a rock and a hard place with regard to web services. We could have supported SOAP per the SOAP SDK in VS6. Obviously, that's something that would have been good in the short term, but it's going to be outdated very quickly, right, by VS.NET. The VS.NET stuff is not solid enough to build on it yet. So we really were kind of in between, an existing SOAP implementation that's going to be obsolete very quickly, and the VS.NET implementation, which is what we do want to base it on moving forward, that's not ready yet. And so what we're going to do is we're going to, in our incremental release, in our point release, by 1.5 or whatever, we'll have some sort of point release, that's the plan, scheduled for release next year, that will support the VS.NET official SOAP services model. Does that make sense? So in the short term, I would just tell that story. I would just say, hey, in the short term, we support SOAP through support of the BTF2 framework. Moving forward, we're going to support SOAP services within the BizTalk orchestration environment per VS.NET. But that is forward-looking.
And I assume then that implementation with VS.NET would comply with the W3C standards, whatever they happen to be at that particular point in time?
Yeah, that's a yes, with an asterisk, right? Because those efforts are so ongoing. Because if we think about the W3C efforts, W3C has created this basic work. They've accepted the SOAP submission. But as we know, there are going to be other working groups that start layering on top of that, right? So we'll keep up with that as best we can. So are we committed to supporting those technologies? Absolutely, right? But, shipping products, requires you to stick stakes in the ground as of certain points in time, or you'll never ship ever, you'll never ship any product ever unless you say, okay, we've got to build the product per this technology. And so by the time you ship the product, sometimes there can be, a new iteration of that technology that's occurred before you ship. And there's nothing we can do about that. And people that don't understand that don't understand the reality of shipping products. So we all, need to get better, I think, at saying, hey, if you want to ship a product that solves customer problems, you've got to put together specs that are solid, and you've got to stick a stake in the ground as of a certain point in time. And that means that sometimes you're going to release a product that was recently, sometimes very recently, outdated. Right?
Kevin, my question is on prices. I think yesterday we said something about BizTalk being the Enterprise Edition being $25,000, something like that. And how does it compare with the prices of other products like web methods?
Okay, yeah, good question. So the question was, you heard yesterday that pricing was pretty solid for BizTalk. There was an asterisk, I think, next to it, so we think that'll be the pricing, but it was a little bit. The pricing is, there's an Enterprise Edition and a Standard Edition. I should probably just make clear how we're positioning that. The Enterprise Edition is for the hub in any hub and spoke model. So if an organization needs to connect a bunch of stuff together, no matter where that stuff is, then they want to use the Enterprise Edition. The Standard Edition is really designed for the spoke side. So if I am XYZ Corporation and I have 95 stores, then I'm going to use BizTalk Enterprise Edition at corporate, right? And I can put that on multiple processors for $25,000 per processor. And then I can drop a version of Standard out there maybe at my stores if I need to do data transformation at the store. You don't have to put BizTalk on the other end. I could have stores that feed me information all day long in XML or EDI or flat file formats over various transports and never have to put any bits out of the store, right? Just use Enterprise and Corporate. But Standard is intended to play that role. The price for Standard is $5,000. And since it's intended for a one processor box or to only use one processor of a larger box, then it's not per processor per se, right? It's just $5,000. Drop it on the box, it uses one processor.
And there's some performance differences between Standard and Enterprise.
Yeah, it's the Enterprise version is optimized for performance. The Standard Edition is going to be optimized for like interactive reporting and that kind of thing. So it will be slower. And we'll only run on one processor, no federated system, so you can't put a bunch of servers together to all behave as one virtual server. And we also don't support, there's no SDK in it, for example. Meant as bespoke, not a big development environment. So to come back to your question, $25K per processor for Enterprise. How does that relate to our competition? Way less. This is going to be a very expensive product for Microsoft, right? I think it's our most expensive product overall. It's trivial in cost compared to most of our competitors.
You're talking orders of magnitude, right?
Well, Web Methods sold the software to a Fortune 50 organization. Fortune 50 organization is a big company, so they probably have a lot of buying power, right? Big brand name. And they paid $685,000 for 2 quad processor boxes. Okay? That's almost $100,000 per CPU. Right? That's